Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. We are officially 1 month away from NBA basketball. Something around there. I don't know when this video is going to be released, but given that we are so close to the NBA season starting, we figured now would be the best time for us to talk about our predictions for the upcoming year. So like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and let's not wait any longer. Here is the Sweatshops predictions for the Western Conference playoff seeding. So we really just have two basic tenets that we kept in mind when we were doing our rankings. The first is projections are nice, but you must also take into account what have you done for me lately. This allows us to have a little bit of fun on teams we think can have drastic improvements this year, but also try to keep reality in mind and say, hey, are they really gonna overshadow this team that's been in the playoffs 3-some years in a row? The second tenet we have is injuries must be taken into account. I'm not just gonna try to guess every single injury, but if a player is injury prone, as in they miss about 20 games a year or more, I'm going to have to take that into account with my rankings. With that out of the way, we got these rankings broken into tiers, kind of showing about the bucket on where we think these teams lie in relation to the rest of the West. But the first team we're going over is in a bucket by themselves. Let's get right into it. The first tier is the bottom of the barrel. No hate, Trailblazers fans. I don't despise your team. I'm not saying you're definitely going to be trash, because I do like some of your prospects. What I am saying though is that if we were trying to pick which team is most likely to not break double-digit wins in the West, y'all the #1 draft pick. I'm sorry. The main issue I have with your team is it's all just hopes and prayers right now. With everyone else in the West, there's at least one person on their roster that I can hang my hat on and say, hey, if all else fails, this guy will win them a couple games based solely on his talent. I can't say that with Portland, so that's why you are in the garbage bin. Next up, for teams 14 and 13, we have the Hobbit house tier. That'll be explained later. The Utah Jazz and the Los Angeles Clippers, 14 and 13 respectfully, are two teams that I'm pretty sure will not make the playoffs, but even if I bet a significant sum of money on them both missing the dance, they just barely cross the minimum talent threshold of potential playoff teams, so I can't completely count them out. Both teams got a good coach, one fringe all-star, and a bunch of high-level role players surrounding them. This means they both have some fairly high floors, higher than a few teams I have ahead of them actually, but they also have much lower ceilings, hence the name. High floors, low ceilings, and we all Gandalf, giving us thoracic kyphosis walking through your place of residence. I got the Clippers a skosh higher than the Jazz because of the specter of Kawhi Leonard. If he stays healthy, then LA would probably be 2 tiers up for me, but we all know he's probably missing 50 games, so why kid ourselves? These two teams are also the two most likely sellers maybe in the entire NBA, so that has to be taken into account. The teams are pretty mid now, and they're most likely to be worse by season's end. Next tier, 12, 11, and 10, we have the fighting for scraps tier. These three teams, the Rockets, the Warriors, and the Spurs, I got fighting for that last play-in spot. At the absolute highest, I can see maybe one of these guys in the 7th or 8th seed, but I'd bet against it. All these teams just have too much variance for me to really believe in them. I've already gone over my doubts about the Warriors. Click the video in the upper right hand corner if you want my extensive thoughts, but to make a long story short, the Warriors are betting all their chips on one of or both of Podziemski and Kuminga having a fringe all-star type season, and while I do like both of them, I just don't see that level of production out of them, at least this upcoming year. I also think the positional fit of their roster leaves a little bit to be desired. The Rockets, I love their group of prospects, specifically their wing room, could end up as the deepest forward room in the league. There's just too many questions of how the prospects will fit together for me to really trust them. And finally, the Spurs, again, already made a video about them. Look in the upper right hand corner to see my full thoughts, but I really like the roster. I think they got a really solid set of vets and prospects surrounding Victor that all fit together, and I also think Victor is gonna have a superstar jump this year, but they're the least proven team in this tier, and their floor is definitely the lowest out of the group, and maybe the last two groups. So there we go. The next tier, I believe this is 9, 8, 7, and 6, the middle of the pack, kind of self-explanatory. The Lakers, the Grizzlies, the Kings, and the Pelicans, all these teams I got fighting to stay above the play-in tournament, but not much else. They're all good, but to me they just feel like they're a small step below the actual contenders in the West. Let's start top down. I got the Kings at the top of the middle because to my eye they have the fewest holes in their roster, no Shia LaBeouf. De'Aaron and Sabonis are a solid duo to have in the West. As far as depth of roster goes, it's probably them and OKC. As far as who has the deepest in the West, my one thing with them, or two things, they don't have enough defenders, and I'm not sure about the DeMar DeRozan signing. I'm willing to hear it out, but I'm gonna have to see everything work with my own two eyes before I start giving them praise. The Pelicans and Grizzlies I have just below them. They have a few more overt flaws. I'm putting them together in the same mini tier because they are largely the same for me in strengths and weaknesses. Their strengths, they're sending athletic freak star players from South Carolina, as well as their solid second and third options. Their weaknesses, their bench and 5 positions are question marks. I'd like to focus on that latter weakness specifically. Both teams are relying on rookies to start for them at the center position, which just leaves me a little bit wary. The way these teams are set up, ideally the center position's responsibilities will be very minimal. So how good or bad Missy and Edie are shouldn't have a large impact on the level of play for the whole team. But still, I just feel weird about putting so much trust in rookies with no real backup plan on the roster. I got the Grizzlies a skosh higher than I keep saying skosh. What am I, 70? I got the Grizzlies a little bit higher than the Pelicans just because of Zion's injury history, although I do think with Zion's weight loss this offseason, this may be his most healthy year, which is why I have them this high to begin with. But yeah, 7 Grizzlies, 8 Pelicans, and 9 we got the Los Angeles Lakers, who have so many things going on, but what else would you expect? They're the Lakers, the spoiled only child in your 3rd grade science class. JJ Redick is literally a middle school basketball coach. He's only 6 months older than his best player, LeBron James, who literally said he played in the Olympics because he might never get the chance to play a game of high-level basketball again. And the supporting cast of their roster by Western Conference playoff team standards is mid. Bron and AD being maybe the best duo in the West, gotta keep them in this tier, but they just got too much BS surrounding their team for me to push them higher. The next tier, the Fringe Contenders. These guys, the Suns and the Nuggets, in that order. These guys are close. I can see them hoisting the Western Conference Championship trophy if I squint hard enough, but they don't have quite enough going for them for me to really get on their side. And even if they did, I don't think they'll be good regular season teams at all. With the Suns, I really think the Tyus Jones signing is going to be a lot more impactful than people are giving it credit for. Tyus is exactly what the doctor ordered for this team, just a solid PG. Hopefully they'll start him and then move Bradley Beal to the 6-man role. Even with Tyus' fit though, the Suns' depth, defense, and roster fit, pretty much all the same things that led to them getting swept last year, are still huge hindrances. And the Nuggets, who I have not a substantial but a noticeable step above them. Yes, they have the best player in the league, but they switch out KCP with Russ, which is a big downgrade. They did get Sarge, who should actually be a very good backup big in the non-Jokic minutes, but outside of him and maybe Russ, they got no rotation players. They just don't have enough depth for the regular season for me to really think they can actually make another push for the #1 seed. And their shooting and defense has me a little bit worried for the playoffs. If Jamal Murray's slump from the postseason and the Olympics is the new norm for him, things could get spooky real quick for Denver. And finally, the final tier, 3, 2, and 1, we have Le Creme de la Creme. The Thunder, the Wolves, and the Mavs, to me, these 3 teams are the most likely teams to be at the top of the Western Conference. And to me, they are also the 3 most likely teams to represent the West in the NBA Finals in 2025. Let's go from 3rd to 1st. In 3rd, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I really like Minnesota's offseason. It wasn't anything crazy, just marginal improvement, but still necessary. Even though I think Rob Dillingham, like most undersized shot-creating guards, will take a couple years to really get acclimated to the NBA, I like his fit on this roster long-term. And even though Joe Ingles at this stage in his career is worse than Kyle Anderson, his skill set of shooting, scoring, and facilitating matches this team's needs a little better than Slow-Mo's did. I also got the arrow pointing up on Ant and Naz Reid, and the team just made the Western Conference Finals last year. This team should be more than able to win it this go around. They just have a few drawbacks though that's keeping them at 3 for me. 1, the Rudy Gobert specter. Are we gonna keep treating Gobert like one of the best defensive players of all time, or are we gonna treat him like what he actually is? A solid solid defender who's good situationally, but should be benched for Nas in certain matchups. The second thing holding me back is the T-Wolves' depth looks fine right now on paper, but Conley and Ingles are both pretty old, and as I said before, Rob Dillingham's archetype usually takes a couple years to break out in the NBA. If the worst case scenario takes place and all three of these guys are below average players, then things could get pretty iffy for the T-Wolves rotation, at least in the playoffs. In second, I have the Dallas Mavericks, the reigning Western Conference champions who added Klay Thompson. I really like this squad. I think the Klay Thompson signing is getting a bit overblown. I would not be surprised if Najee Marshall actually ends up starting more games than him, but still, the Mavs played excellent defense on the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Better defense than anyone has played all year. They should have won. I don't know if they should have won, but they had a chance to win. The reason they lost is because they were shooting open threes at a Daniel Jones type clip. Cross sports, but whatever. There are few people in the league I'm signing over Klay to hit wide open threes, so that should help with that at least. Najee Marshall as well. On top of that, I don't hear a lot of people talking about the arrow pointing up on the Lively-Gafford tandem, especially Lively. He was 19 last year and had an excellent rookie season. He's bound to improve greatly. Also, the team was dealing with trades and injuries all year. Even though they got a couple of new signings, the chemistry now is probably equivalent to the chemistry they had at the beginning of the playoffs last year. Like, they are really good and would probably be number one if I was at all confident that Kyrie Irving was going to have another season nearly as healthy as he had last year. I'm sorry, but no team in the West other than the Lakers is more dependent offensively on their two stars to get things going. If Kyrie gets hurt, they should be able to keep things afloat a little better than last year now that they have Klay, but still, I think Kyrie playing 60-some games like he did last year is unlikely, and that's definitely gonna hurt the team. Finally though, we got the number one spot. Who else? Who else but the OKC Thunder? Man, it's been a long 4 or 5, 6. How long have we been trash? I don't know, but it's nice to be at the top. Hopefully being at the top of the Sweatshop power rankings is not the apex of this team, but you gotta start somewhere. I love this team. I don't really think we have any holes. The two things I'm kind of worried about maybe is if Chet Holmgren and or Jalen Williams don't have a fringe all-star type year and we really just have Shea holding down the fort in the playoffs again, then things could get a little bit spooky. I could see us getting upset in round 2. And then also, Chet did play every single game last year, but a person with his physical makeup is always gonna have some injury question marks with me. But the additions of Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, in addition to us being one of the youngest rosters in the league last year and having our first bout of playoff experience, I can see teams beating us in the playoffs, but I just can't see anyone else beating us in the regular season wins-wise. With our depth, with our young guys, with the two new veteran additions, I can't see any other team being the number 1 seed. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. We greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy this content, why don't you go ahead and like and subscribe? Comment down below which ranking you agreed with the most or which ranking you had the biggest problem with. Share the video with a friend, and as always, stay sweaty, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.